Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media.
Welcome.
Well, everyone, whether you call it Gratitude Day, Thanksgiving, or somewhere in between, this is a special time for us because we would not exist without our NLP fam. So it's so important to us that we welcomed you to our table. You're going to hear from voices, our supporters, our fans, and our family talking about the importance of this show, this platform, as we continue to go into the unknown. But welcome home, y'all, and we're so happy to be sharing this moment with you.
Hey guys, love the podcast, and I've been a fan of all of your work individually for a while. I wanted to talk about the Rainbow Coalition conversation you guys had on today's episode. As someone who's mixed with a Black mother from Newark, New Jersey, and an immigrant father from Guatemala, I personally feel like the Rainbow Coalition, or the idea of a Rainbow Coalition, is not happening, at least in practice or in my lived experience. As someone who's been in community with Black folks and Latinos, I don't see the teamwork in that, or I don't see it happening the way I wish it was happening. And so I guess my question is, do you think during this time and during these next 4 years, the Black community should turn inwards and focus more on Black folks and not necessarily leave everyone else behind? Because we know that when Black folks win, actually everyone wins. But what do you think should be happening? Because I think we're seeing that, other people of color don't have Black people's backs the way we wish they would.
Greetings, Native Land Podcast. My name is Keith. I'm from D.C. How you doing, Tiffany? What's going on, Angela? How you doing, Andrew? I just wanted to make a firm comment that Tiffany made on her last session about Trump getting half the country, and she was correct when saying that he didn't necessarily get half. Trump approximately got 32% of the voting population. Kamala Harris got 30% of the voting population, approximately 30.4% of the voting population, and 37% of the voting population decided to stay home and sit on the couch. If the couch was on the ballot, it would have gotten the popular vote, and it would have won every electoral vote in the union with 90 million votes. Which is a 14 million margin separation. And if you divide that by the 50 states, you get a 280,000 margin on average for each state. And it could be higher depending on how they were voting. Again, that is my 2 cents. I appreciate it. Keep it going. We look forward to your show. Thanks.
Hey, Native Land Pod. My name is Rika. I am from Seattle. Hey, Angela. So I believe that we lost this election on education. And when you're not educated about how this country is run and civics, you will vote against your best interests. So here's what I propose. Trump is going to elect 15 people to his cabinet, maybe 16 with Elon Musk. And then there's the president and vice president. What does the attorney general do? What does the vice president do? What does the secretary of state do? What is Vivek and Elon Musk going to be doing, right? So that's what, like 15, 18, 20 people that we should be watching. What if we divvied up, gave homework to 15, 20 people in the Native Land Pod universe? So for example, say Matt Gaetz, say he's appointed. Say I, Rika, am assigned to follow all things Matt Gaetz and what he is doing as the Attorney General and what the Attorney General of the United States does and can do, has done in the past. What if we divvied all of that up? Somebody else had Secretary of State and so on and so forth. And then we reported back to the Native Land Pod to let each other know what is happening, right? Because we're all so busy. There's so much going on. We're just trying to survive that all of us don't have time to do all of that homework. So what if we collectively did the homework together and educated each other on civics in this country? That's what I propose. So, yeah.
Hey, what's up, Native Land? This is Craig in Brooklyn. Just wanted to say that I just got to the part of the last show where you guys were bringing up the question of whether or not you should continue as a podcast. And emphatically, I say, please continue. We're at a point in our country where a lot of us are asking whether or not we should continue. And you guys represent the hopes and the dreams and some of the fears and anguish of what we're dealing with right now. So we need to know that there are people out there that are speaking for us. and that are just as concerned about this nation's future as us. So please, please, please continue. I love you guys. Take care.
Hey, Native Land Pod. Hi, Native Land Pod. I'm Danae. I'm Kimberly Archie. And we are dropping in to say hello because both of us have old friends that are part of your organization. So, Andrew, I don't even know if you remember me, Andrew. Hi, Danae from WFSU NPR. And Kimberly Archie, you know me, Angela Rye, and you introduced me to Andrew and Tiffany previously. So we have things to say. We'll send them under another cover. But one of the things is keep the show going. Yes. It is incredibly important. Your voices are necessary. Exactly.
So on this day, as we remember the lies that we learned, we want to honor the Indigenous community and the truth around what this day means for all of us. But as we reflect on lies, we couldn't think of a better segment to highlight, and that's when we discuss Project 2025. Take a listen.
What is Project 2025? It is everyone here. This is the movement. We are going to be prepared day one, January 2025, to hit the ground running as conservatives to really help the next president. Heritage got on the marker as an organization by delivering the first mandate for leadership in 1980 to President-elect Reagan. This task in 2024 is too big for any one think tank. This has to be a movement. And what we've done is use our convening power here at Heritage to bring the entire movement together. So 2025 is not a Heritage thing, it's a conservative movement thing. But what we're doing is systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state.
That was Paul Dans from Project 2025 telling us the truth about what this really is. The one thing I want to flag for y'all on the outset is Peter Navarro, who is credited with being the master architect of Project 2025, was just sentenced to serve time in federal prison 2 weeks ago for refusing to comply with a congressional subpoena about his role in the insurrection. And alas, here we are with the insurrectionist blueprint, also known as Project 2025. All 900 plus pages of it have been shared with you, Tiff and Andrew. I did not go through every single page, but I went through enough. And here's the thing that stood out to me. Woke progressivism, woke culture warriors, woke bureaucrats, woke extremism, woke propaganda, woke agenda, wokeism, woke dominated system of public schools and university, woke revolutionaries, woke, radical supposedly woke faction, woke policies in corporate America, woke gender ideology, and even the Department of Education caught some strays with as a convenient one-stop shop for the woke education cartel. Do you notice a trend?
I do. Can I?
This is crazy.
I want to just offer a little bit of background for the viewer. So this is the birth child of the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is a very conservative think tank that came out under President Nixon. So that should tell you something. But they really started gaining traction and power under President Ronald Reagan. The Project 25, a lot of organizations, a lot of groups, a lot of constituencies have policy agendas. So policy or Project 25 is kind of like that, but extremely more dangerous. And I'll tell you why. It's a board of more than 80 conservative organizations. That's
100 now,
This
Tiff.
project is 100 organizations, all linked in this whole cesspool of policies to dark money. Including Leonard Leo, who was very influential in shaping the Supreme Court of the United States under Donald Trump, very attached to him. It does not respect the separation of church and state, and it is literally trying to reimagine the executive branch of government. You heard him say weaponized conservatives. They've put millions of dollars in their political arm, Heritage for America. The interesting thing about this, Angela, you and Andrew, you both probably know this, the Heritage Foundation used to be led by a Black woman. K. Cole James, who is a Hampton University graduate. And Sister Girl was definitely parroting all the talking points, all the ridiculous statements coming out of Heritage Foundation. They're not new. A lot of these policies aren't even new. They're just repackaged and put out there. The reason why we should take this seriously, because like I said, a lot of groups will put out these policy agendas, is because they have all aligned. And so Andrew makes this point. I don't want to steal your point, Andrew, but Andrew makes the point all the time that we talk about Donald Trump and the Republican Party as though they're separate things. And they have now merged. The Republican Party is now run by right-wing zealots and MAGA extremists. These are the people they are beholden to. And so the whole list that Angela just ran down, should Republicans take the presidency and potentially the House and potentially the Senate, they will be able to roughhouse and ramshot all of these policies through at the federal level, which is their agenda. Andrew and Angela go through all of it. I have more questions than I do answers, but I want to punctuate how dangerous Project 2025 is. It's not the first time we've seen it, and hopefully it will be the last time we talk about it, but I have my doubts.
And Andrew,
I agree, Tiff. The dangers here can't be underscored. So all of us know the name Koch brothers. We say it is talked about all the time. Very wealthy, Koch brother industries. Da 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 da. Well, before there were the Koch brothers, there was Richard Mellon Scaife. He is the person responsible for founding the Heritage Foundation and setting up the initial cadre of conservative organizations that didn't exist then, but were created in the mid-1970s after Republicans felt, frankly, annihilated after Nixon's stepping down from the White House. At that time, liberals, frankly, actually had organization. They had funded media outlets. They had funded think tanks. Their ideas had gotten traction. They had just passed the Voting Rights Act. We were thriving in many ways. And at that point, rich white men, as represented by Scaife, Mellon Scaife, Mills, Kochs, all those folks, they were top five Coors, as we know the Coors family. The top five conservative donors got together and put tens of millions, now hundreds of millions of dollars into building what we now know today as the new conservative movement.
They were aided by white women. Just want to add that.
No doubt about it. But certainly these were white men and billions of money either inherited or manipulated through the system, and they put their money back in protecting their hides. Now, this is where I find the danger, Tiff and Angela. It is that these folks, before it was about getting Republicans elected, right, and governing through the elected process. Now it is about the tens of, hundreds of thousands of federal workers who will now be replaced as public servants, which means these are individuals who serve regardless of whether there's a Democratic or Republican administration.
Schedule F.
Where these folks kept getting caught up were because they wanted to achieve one goal, but career service people, professionals who work for the Department of Agriculture and Energy and Education would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Secretary, you can't do that because that's against the law per section such and such and such and such and such." Well, they don't want people checking them like that. They want loyalists who are willing to do whatever the executive says. These people envision something that is known as the unitary executive. And what that means is not just they don't believe in a separation of powers, they don't believe in a separation of states, separation of governance, meaning the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative. They believe that the president, when elected president, has all power.
Like
I have news for those folks.
Right.
We got rid of that when we were founded. The American Revolution was about throwing off the yoke of the unitary executive, the king. We don't elect kings in the United States of America. So if anybody ever gets deluded that these folks are actually championing democracy, that these folks actually believe in standing up, protecting, conserving the Constitution, or that they're strict constructionists. We hear that term a lot of times referred to Republicans or conservatives. That's not what it is at all. They only believe that to this end, that their agenda wins. When their agenda doesn't win, they don't believe in the judiciary. They don't believe in the legislative. And if the president is the problem, they don't believe in the executive at that time.
That's right.
There are no commitments to beliefs. As we've all heard in politics, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interest.
Yeah.
So their interests and their beliefs and their philosophy is all about winning for them. And the moment that they're not winning, that philosophy can be upended at any moment. And that's where we are right now.
That's, I think, the thing. So we talked about the Koch brothers. We talked about the 100 plus organizations who've signed on to this coalition to participate in dismantling the federal government, department by department, agency by agency, appointee by appointee, and burrowed in employees. Yes, but they would burrow in, which is also not new. They talked about it being an issue long before even Barack Obama was president. People burrowed in. They would be political, and they just found the safest career job, and they stay there. They've been talking about doing that, and I think now it's on a larger scale. I think the other thing that's very fascinating to me, I just want to acknowledge that I envy their ability to unite around some common goals. I am jealous of it. I am frustrated by the fact that we don't have something like this, we meaning Black folks, that represent our interests, because when we do, I talk about it all the time, the Black agenda that was put forth by the Black to the Future Action Fund by our dear sister Alicia Garza, it is like pulling teeth to get Black folks to support something that benefits our best interest. They want to know who wrote it, why they wrote it, when did they write it, who's in charge, was it a man? If it's not a man, I can't get behind it. If it was a woman, is it a woman that I like? All of that is so frustrating to me, and I get so upset when we can't set aside a thing to focus on the main thing. And they've done this here, and they've been doing it for many years. Here's one place where I will say that they have a big benefit. Speaking of DEI and dollars they didn't earn. They put the dollars they didn't earn towards something that benefits them in a very towards a common goal. $22 million. So I bet, I'm just thinking, we probably could get on the same page, and we probably could move the needle a little bit further down the road if we had the same resources they have to expend on these things, whether it's Americans for Prosperity or the American Legislative Exchange Council or the Heritage Foundation or now Project 2025, all of which have benefited from the infrastructure that they've been establishing, frankly, since 1619. How about that?
Well, there may be a point of disagreement here because I think the Republican Party, they're easier to coalesce because they have one common goal. I mean, racism is at the root of everything they want. So I don't want to compare Black folks to them. Like I think our fractured interest is because we're not a homogenous group of people. We have different interests. We have different goals. I think that's the beauty of us as a people. And I often hear people credit the Republicans with like, oh, but they have such a simple message, or they're better at communicating. I don't know if that's true. I think their audience is a little more simple and willfully ignorant to a lot of things around policy. I think on the left, and listen, ignorance extends to no matter what political party, no matter what socioeconomic background. Exactly. It's not partisan. However, I think on the right side, you have people who are just pretty much flatlined. They're an easier group to coalesce. On the left, you have people who I would argue are a bit more curious about things, are not so easily manipulated, and is a much bigger tent of people. And so we all represent our interest passionately. On the right, you have something that's very complicated, like the Affordable Care Act, and you could throw out something like death panels and people will latch onto it. On the left, it's a little more intellectual. People have questions about that. And certainly when it comes to Black folks, I think because we have been so out of the process for so long, we have been denied for so long, that now that we're in this process, I think we've done an amazing job of working together and being a tight community and supporting each other and fighting for a lot of our rights in a much more wholesome and holistic way than the Republican Party, whose entire agenda is based on hate and hating other people who they think is taking something from them.
Yeah, I think that their agenda, if I could, Andrew, just really quick, their agenda is more simple, but I think it's intellectually dishonest too for us to say everyone who votes conservative is dumb.
I agree.
I think that we have to be careful with that. I'm also saying that the organization behind and the operation behind what they've done is actually massive, and it's incredibly intricate. Even if the messaging is simple, I think that it would be really it's not smart for us to say that it's not very complex. They have 501c3, C4s, PACs. They have, again, an American Legislative Exchange Council, which is boilerplate legislation for people in all 50 states to send in and to ensure that it all gets passed. That's what all this anti-DEI legislation is now in 30 plus states. So it is incredibly complex, and and we could argue that many of them are focused just on the racism of it all, but it started under the guise of fiscal conservatism. Even when you look at their 4 pillars that they're all saying that they had to agree on, they're still really broad. And honestly, Joe Biden's border policy fits in with number 3. I'll read it. It says, restore the family. This is number 1. Restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. We know what that really means to somebody else. Maybe it means something exactly what it says. Number 2, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Expect for when it's your vagina. Number 3, defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. Sounds like it might not be a bad idea if you don't read between the lines. And 4, secure our God-given individual rights to live freely. I said to lie freely, that too. To live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. So when you hear these things on their face, they don't sound bad, but when you get into the 900 plus pages and they want to dismantle the Department of Justice and they want to ensure that a president can manipulate what's happening in the FBI and DOJ to target political opponents, that reads a little differently. So I think that there's something smart here.
There is something smart, but guess what? They got it from us. Before there was ever an American Legislative Exchange Council, there was something known as the Center for Policy Alternatives. This was a national coalition of progressively aligned legislators across all 50 states of the United States. And they came together, produced a policy manual every year, and then progressive legislators in the states could take those policies and then work toward implementation. That pre-existed what the right existed. A lot of people know me as a candidate, but before I was a candidate, and while I was running for office and serving in office, I was part of building progressive pipelining. In my case, it was candidate development, recruitment. And then after that, it was gathering those same people that we saw and helped get elected to make sure that they were then pushing the policies that would advance our goals. Tiffany, I agree with you from the standpoint that it is so much easier to organize people who are all similarly interested in the same thing. And that same thing, we can all differ about, but I think that same thing is about we've had power for a very long time. There are threats to our access to that power. We exist to maintain our power.
That's it.
The Koch brothers are not gratuitous. The reason why they helped build a conservative pipeline on the right is because they are the largest polluting industries. The Koch industries and the subsidiaries that they own are among the largest polluters in the country. So it would make all the sense in the world to see them elect conservatives who are anti-EPA, who are judges who say, oh, no, we're not going to be the big enforcement state. We are going to be the little small government state where these issues are handled discreetly and not with a big hammer like the EPA. They were acting in their interest. I'll say this. I think the left has fallen off on girding up our institutions that then advance our ideas. What the right has taught us is that they are willing to go all the way in, and Constitution be damned and courts be damned. It doesn't matter. We're willing to go all the way in to conserve our power. The reason why the left, I think, is a harder group to organize and coalesce around a single idea is because largely we're motivated by what our need is. Just as the right is. Their need is to maintain the power that they've always had. For us, our need might be food on the table, gas in the tank, women protections at the workplace, and also with autonomy on their bodies, Black people's ability to go to schools, our ability to maintain those same institutions when those institutions start producing Black folks who then end up becoming successful parts of boards, elected officials, potentially presidents of the United States, and then they challenge our power. So what do? We go and delegitimize their institutions so that they can't continue to produce the folks who are going to threaten our power. The right is they're no more brilliant than we are. We did this first. They learned from us, and then we fell off the bus because our needs, as basic as they may be, became more divergent with the diversity of people in our coalition and the needs that each of us have had. And so we've got to get back to the basics, y'all. And even if we were dealing with your point here, Angela, which is just amongst Black folks, how do we do this? My suggestion would be, one, we need to get a political operation in order that trains the candidates we want to see, then can get those folks successfully elected, right? So there's a whole political arm to this thing. Then we need a policy center.
We have that. We don't support it. We have that. We don't. Yes, we do. We have the CBC Institute. We have the Collective PAC doing that. We have the Joint Center, which almost went completely under because we don't support the things that we have.
This is what I'm talking about, Angela. That is the point to be had here, which is from a resource standpoint. The left has money.
I'm not talking about the left.
No. But this is why it's. But the left doesn't exist without the Blacks.
That's fair.
In fact, the left doesn't exist at all.
That's true.
And could never exist without us.
Yeah.
And so if you are interested in advancing the left's agenda, then your interest must coincide with building an electoral operation that, by the way, doesn't just train, doesn't just elect, but has a hammer at the end of the day, which means if you don't do what you committed to doing, if you get in there and then you get sold out to the power interests that you were elected to dismantle, we're taking you out.
Yeah.
All right. We're taking you out. So our enforcement mechanism has to exist on a level that's bigger than the fact that we share the same skin tone. That ain't it. We can be that, right? You just gave examples of the Hampton woman who used to be, over heritage. They got them everywhere. I would venture to argue that the people who are being appointed to the board of trustees at Tennessee State University, who all may look like us, have a different interest in mind. They didn't get appointed on the same that the others got booted out for no reason. All right. So we got to be suspicious about those intentions, but we have the power to build those same structures on our side and maintain them on our side. We just have to decide that that's what we're in the interest of doing. And instead, I think we all get freaked out by election cycle to election cycle. We have this big old threat of democracy diminishing over our heads, and we compromise our way out of what we want. And sake of what we have available at this current time.
Yeah. But I just want to say, I agree with everything you said, Andrew. And I just think it's tragic that you are not on, like, every campaign ought to be calling you, every consultant group ought to be calling you, because this is work that you've done and it just informed me. I mean, mine was much more anecdotal, and then they get all their shit from us. The way that Black folks have organized in this country has cast a wide net of influence across the globe. So even their language comes from us. They didn't know what woke was 10 years ago. They literally cut and paste, and none of this stuff is new. We've already had the Make America Great Again candidate. That was Ronald Reagan. That was his whole slogan. We already saw all these policies come out of the Nixon era. And that's why I think it's so important to say they were aided by white women, because Phyllis Schlafly led a whole army of folks trying, and even fiscal conservative movements, Angela, are rooted in racism. So I think we all agree the same, but I think we all have different approaches. I think this could be a mini pod personally, but I think we all have different approaches.
It needs to be.
To how to get there. But I know we got to move on. But Angela, I have a question for you, because we see this policy that the Heritage Foundation is putting out, Project 2025. Let's say, worst case scenario, Donald Trump is elected. And the Republicans have one of the chambers of Congress, the upper chamber in the Senate or lower chamber in the House. How likely is it that this policy will start to take shape? How likely will they be able to reimagine the executive branch of government, because they can't do much without congressional approval?
First and foremost, Project 2025 is already well underway. Like, this isn't something that they're waiting for Donald Trump to be elected for. The point where they would have to wait for his election is around who gets into the Schedule F jobs, federal government jobs that aren't appointed. The part that they would need to wait for who is appointed as those cabinet secretaries, other federal appointments that are not Senate confirmed. If they have, you said he has a chamber, if he has the Senate, he can confirm his full slate of judges, his full slate of everybody that is senior enough in the administration that needs a Senate confirmed appointment. So there's a lot that they can do. He can do a lot with the executive order. If Donald Trump is elected again, he will dare the Supreme Court to challenge anything that he tries to get through via executive order. And I think it will be including things that should be reserved for legislation. So at this point, go ahead.
Agreed, Angela. And I would just say this. Remember, we heckled Mitt Romney about the binders full of women comment when he was talking about
that's what this is.
Candidates. This is the binder full of conservatives.
Yep.
What they are building are the resumes of individuals that they want to go in. And Angela talked about the appointment level. But what makes this even more dangerous is that they're talking about this at the careerist level.
Yeah, I said
they're
that too.
saying we want
Schedule
you
F.
in the appointments. Excuse me, Lord. Please forgive me, y'all. Forget the appointments. This is about we're going to go into these departments and staff up with conservatives who will effectuate our agenda regardless of who the president is. And if the president is the president of our choosing at this time, then you act in their interest. If they're not, then you act in our interest and you be a stopgap to whatever progressives may want to do, because now you're part of the wheel that keeps this machine running. And that we have to all be terrified of. We all got to be terrified of that.
I want to this is my last thing on this. I just want to point out to Tiff's point on page 4 of the 900-page document in the foreword, it says, today the American family is in crisis. 40% of all children are born to unmarried mothers, including more than 70% of Black children. They go on to talk about pornography must be outlawed. Illicit drug, their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. I mean, I just think
pornography. When the Republican convention was held in Florida down in Tampa a couple of years ago, the hotel said the highest search rates they had were to porn sites, and the strip houses saw record profits over the Super Bowl, y'all.
Listen here, I am not confused about the hypocrisy. All I'm saying is, if they can slide that $22 million over this way, we watch out, because we've always been able to do a lot with a little. And I'm just saying, we ain't got the same resources. But
my challenge is to the progressive white donors who want to be in alignment. Stand up some money and allow us to build the institutions that protect us and move our issues more progressively forward.
If they're not afraid of DEI challenges. CTA.
I just want to say the most important thing that Angela said that I hope everybody takes note of. Project 2025 is already underway.
Yes,
the Civil War didn't start with the first gunfire between the Union and the Confederacy. Battles don't start with the first knuckles thrown. Like, the battle is already happening. We are already in the thick of it. So if we're all sitting around waiting for the big bad boogeyman, the big bad boogeyman is here.
I just want to say, for the record, y'all didn't even want to talk about this. Y'all thought you weren't going to have nothing. I knew you was lying. Anyway,
I didn't say I didn't want to talk about it.
We got one more.
I don't have a lot.
You got a lot. We got one more commercial break, but we will be back.
So we talked about it before, presidential immunity in the wake of the Supreme Court decision. And now, under a Trump administration, we may have to really deal with it. This next segment that we'll revisit is on the fallout from the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity.
Hello, Andrew. Hello, Tiffany. And hello, Angela. My name is Jason Bowman. I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Love Native Land Podcast, and I'm hoping that you guys can answer my question, because I'm sure, like most Americans, we are confused over the Supreme Court's ruling in regards to the January 6th insurrection. So here goes. So I am confused because I would love to know, what exactly does the Supreme Court mean? Do they mean that Donald Trump has immunity over his behavior that basically excited the riot to happen on January 6th? Does this mean that he was on official president duty while sitting in lame duck status? Does this mean that he's immune from all charges? What exactly does this mean? And from my understanding, I assumed that when the president was taking office that they were under oath to protect the Constitution. Everything that he did on January 6th did not protect the Constitution. So I'm just confused. What message does this send to future presidents of this nation?
Apparently, the Supreme Court is still bought and sold, and apparently Justice Clarence Thomas is still dropping it like it's hot, and the bar couldn't be lower. So
Come on.
We have the Supreme Court, which talked about Donald Trump having immunity. We have absolute immunity, which was on the table, and presumptive immunity, which was on the table. Before this particular ruling, this court, is John Roberts, Justice Roberts, starts this decision saying that they've never had to consider criminal immunity for a president before. And that's what was at stake in this particular case. The most critical line in the opinion is this. This case is the first criminal prosecution in our nation's history of a former president for actions taken during his presidency. Now, you would think with a line like that they are going to side with morality, that they are going to side with a president having to be above reproach, kind of like a bishop in the Bible, right? That's not what happens here. They instead say that there is no immunity for unofficial acts. Great, right? You meet us where we are. There's no immunity for our official or unofficial acts, but that there is absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. We'll talk about that. And he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. That's a lot of word salad, but here's the bottom line. Donald Trump, if he takes any number of actions, is not going to be criminally prosecuted, should not be as the office of the president. And many of you have asked, well, this applies to Donald Trump. How does it apply to Joe Biden? I just want to give you this one observation. Joe Biden was they were considering trying Joe Biden for a violation of handling classified documents. In that particular case, Special Prosecutor Richard Hur says he's too old to be tried on this matter. There should be no criminal liability. Well, now under this case doctrine, he couldn't be because he's the president, and it was while he was officially in office. Maybe they could argue because he was a vice president at the time, right? That he didn't do anything, that he could actually be liable. It is interesting to see how this philosophy will come to pass with other officials in a president's cabinet. But the thing that's most interesting to me at this point, y'all, and we can get more into the weeds of this, but I want us to have a conversation, not just a lecture. But the thing that I think is interesting about this particular case as well is Donald Trump, and this is what we've been talking about on this podcast, kind of litigating on this podcast, is Donald Trump using this immunity to say, therefore, I should not be convicted or sentenced on these other counts. There, as we know, there are 88 indictments against Donald Trump, 88 counts. 34 he was found guilty of in a New York court. He used this case from yesterday, this holding in this case, and said, I should not be criminally prosecuted. I should have never been convicted, and I certainly shouldn't be sentenced in this New York case because this should apply even in state matters. Well, the verdict, the sentencing is now postponed by 2 weeks. We were supposed to get lucky on 7/11, not anymore. And now he's saying that this should apply. Here's the problem. Donald Trump was not a sitting president when this happened. Donald Trump was running for office. That is not an official act. So I'm interested to see what this judge does. It makes me nervous that he's postponed this, but I want y'all to weigh in because it's a lot of things, and I want to get into some of the what ifs and ask y'all my poll questions because y'all know we a polling firm now.
Well, one, thank you for helping to break that down for us, Angela. And on the last point with regard to the New York case, he did sign a number of the checks while in the White House. And apparently in the trial, there was evidence allowed to be viewed by the jury of public statements, public tweets that were administered by the president from the White House. And it is now their contention that because that now protected and privileged information was allowed to be shown to the jury, and some might say possibly reasonably calculated in their verdict, that the entire verdict, all 34 counts, ought to be vacated. In fact, the first chilling effect that occurred yesterday was the U.S. Department of Justice in New York was supposed to submit their recommendations to the judge, privately, to the judge around what he should be facing vis-a-vis sentencing. They did not submit that document to the judge yesterday.
The New York State's attorney.
Correct.
So not DOJ.
No, well, the United States Department of Justice, Southern District, was supposed to submit recommendations. I'm sorry. You're right. I apologize, Angela.
It's Alvin Bragg's office.
Alvin Bragg's office.
Yeah.
And they did not submit those recommendations to the judge yesterday when they were due. Then, as a result, the Alvin Bragg's office said we would be in favor of delaying the sentencing by 2 weeks.
Right.
And the judge, of course, has complied. But Angela, one of the so shocking decision in the sense that not only did they get it is, because it is one thing to give Donald Trump what he asked for. They went way above and beyond the simple parameters of what Donald Trump asked for. In fact, in one of the most extreme ways, while they said a former president can be prosecuted for actions he's taken that are of a personal nature, it precludes being shown as submitted as evidence any discussions, conversations, planning, his method, his thinking of those actions taken while he was president. They preclude a jury from being able to have access to any of that information for fear that it may chill the bold actions of a president from doing, saying, and acting as a bold president should. It confused me because there was never, ever, ever an argument that presidents are not bold and haven't been bold prior to Donald Trump because of fear of prosecution. That's I've never heard that before. In fact, we've seen very activist and strong demonstrations of individuals in the presidency. In fact, the court said that the reason why we have to go so far to protect this president and give him immunity, so that this decision, which is for the ages, doesn't cause us to have presidents who are trepidatious about making the kinds of decisions that they must make while in office. Yeah. But that assumption, that statement by the Chief Justice, assumes that presidents prior to Donald Trump but were under the suspicion that they could never be prosecuted. And that can't be right. Let's just look at the case of Lyndon B. Johnson and Ford. Why would Ford have pardoned why would Ford have pardoned Nixon if Nixon didn't have a fear?
I was saying yes to, but not Lyndon B. Johnson. You're right. It's definitely Richard Nixon.
But why would he have issued a pardon to Nixon if there was not a reasonable fear that a president could be prosecuted for actions that they took in office?
Of course. And I think when I was even pushing back, and Tiff, I'd love for you to weigh in here. When I was pushing back on that it was shocking, I think that there was a part of us that kind of knew this was going to happen. We saw, just based on what this Supreme Court is ruling around reproductive justice, what they've ruled around homelessness, what they ruled in Chevron, what they ruled around assault weapons. I mean, we can keep going. I don't know that we were really shocked. And then, of course, January 6th itself, just last week. So I don't know that we were super shocked because of the makeup of this court, not because this is what this court would do. So, Tiff, I want you to weigh in here, and then I have some, I got some focus group questions for y'all.
Well, I have to say, it's so frustrating when I have consumed some of the media around this in both print and broadcast, because I do think people are so into the weeds that for people out there who wonder, why do I care about this? This seems like, 1,000 miles away from me. This is why you should care. Essentially, the court, there is no appeal. The Supreme Court is the highest court of the land, and they have essentially given the office of the president free reign to do whatever they like. So Donald Trump, were he to win another election, could have a political rival assassinated. Donald Trump, were he to win re-election, could use that office to enrich his pockets, which he did the first term. I believe Jared and Ivanka made $80 million the first year he was in office, and it continued to grow. Let's not forget that this is a man who had Kislyak. a Russian operative in the Oval Office. What would stop him? Now, one thing that one of the attorneys argued, who was arguing on Donald Trump's behalf, a question that he posed, which I thought was legitimate. If we are going to allow presidents to be prosecuted, let's say a president has to make the call to have a foreign adversary taken out. Could he then later be subjected to criminal charges? And I thought, well, that is a legitimate question. Now that they've essentially said you can do whatever you want in office, that should give everyone chills. Because imagine what an unhinged, politically inept person whose first job in government was president of the United States. Imagine what he might do with the second term.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. A second term.
We haven't seen.
No, I agree. The second term we haven't seen.
Andrew, one second.
You're right.
1 second. I was just going to say 1 second on this. I want to roll Ketanji Brown Jackson's sound from when they heard the oral arguments in April, because she raises some of the very points and questions, or you made them statements as declarations, Tiff. She raises them as questions to Trump's lawyer. Let's roll that sound.
I'm trying to understand what the disincentive is from turning the Oval Office into, the seat of criminal activity in this country.
I don't think there's any allegation of that in this case. And what George Washington said is, what Benjamin Franklin said is, we view the prosecution of a chief executive as something that everybody cried out against as unconstitutional. And what George Washington said is, we're worried about factional strife, which will.
No, let me put this worry on the table. If the potential for criminal liability is taken off the table, wouldn't there be a significant risk that future presidents would be emboldened to commit crimes with abandon while they're in office? It's right now the fact that we're having this debate because OLC has said that presidents might be prosecuted. Presidents from the beginning of time have understood that that's a possibility. That might be what has kept this office from turning into the kind of crime center that I'm envisioning. But once we say no criminal liability, Mr. President, you can do whatever you want, I'm worried that we would have a worse problem than the problem of the president feeling constrained to follow the law while he's in office.
So yeah, I wanted to play that clip because, as Tiff said, we are very much in the weeds on this. It is important for me to try to lay out how many layers and how detailed they were and meticulous they were about showing all of the ways that Trump is protected in this role. When we learn civics, and this is the danger of taking textbooks out of schools, we learn that the legislative branch makes laws, that the judicial branch interprets or evaluates laws, and that the executive branch carries out the laws. What they're saying now is that the executive branch will make the law, will break the law, will take the law, and will do as they see fit with the law. That's the point. And I think when we look at those pieces, that is very, very scary. This isn't about what Donald Trump will do in office. This is about what anybody elected to the highest office of the land can do. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was absolutely right. There are people who would have never considered running for office, Tiffany and Andrew, who now will consider it because they see it as a way to get away with all of the things that they never could potentially, unless they're, a CEO of a big company. Some of those folks have been running circles and running game for a long time, a la Enron. But I think that we have to really consider what all this means. Now you have a court not just turning a blind eye, but putting pen to paper to say these are the things you can do. That even, and this was the part that was scary for me too. I don't know if you all saw this, but they talked about the outer perimeter of official responsibilities, and that outer perimeter, it still covers your actions as long as they are not manifestly or palpably beyond his authority. But they go on to say all these things that are beyond authority. Clarence Thomas went into talking about how even the role of a special prosecutor should not be a thing.
What does that mean, the outer perimeter? Like when you say, because I imagine a lot of people.
I don't know either. But Tiff, what I'm saying is what it looks like they were doing is like, here are these things that are your official responsibilities. Here are these things that are like kind of related to your official responsibilities. And Even if it looks like you were signing the checks for the hush money, even though you already made some payments during the 2016 campaign, that's what I was going to say earlier, Andrew. But if you sign the checks because you were sitting in the taxpayer paid chair in the Oval Office, that is the outer perimeter of your official responsibility because you were signing them while engaging in the course of other activity. They didn't use that example specifically, but I could see that saying it's not manifestly or palpably beyond his authority because if he were convicted of this, it could be frowned upon and looked bad upon by the rest of the world leaders, or it could look bad for the country. So because it would look bad for the country, we should allow this in as an official activity or outer perimeter activity.
Angela, I don't think they were opaque about that. I think they were very clear, which is even if it is an act that is non-presidential, outside of your duties and responsibility, nothing, you can't get any evidence gathered from while you were president in support of you having broken the law. So they've made it, they've handicapped, they say he can be accountable, but then they handicap his responsibility. And I just want to cite a few examples. One, the Department of Justice, which we all previously thought was the chief attorney on behalf of the United States. The court was explicit. In fact, they said all charges regarding his conversations and his directions given to the attorney general to take certain actions like a letter saying we need to investigate your state and send fake electors or send a whole nother slate, which Donald Trump asked the acting attorney general to do, and he refused to do it and said he would resign. The U.S. Supreme Court said it is not permissible for you to account that as a charge against the president because the Department of Justice is his. The Department of Justice and the Attorney General
remove his AG.
Reports to him, and the president can give direction, have conversation with the Attorney General as well about active investigations, direct who he should investigate, direct who they can bring charges against. All of this they have cloaked in the universal unitary executive, Donald Trump, or whomever else may come after him. The president can also take a bribe for pardoning somebody. Pardon power is exclusively in the jurisdiction of the president of the United States, which means it is a core function, constitutional function, and anything that he does regarding pardons cannot be questioned and he cannot be prosecuted. So if you went to him with $1 million and say, I give you $1 million if you give me a pardon, that cannot be prosecuted in office, out of office, no day of the week.
That's absolute immunity too. So pardoning, if he does anything associated with pardon, that's absolute immunity. Anything associated with any member of his cabinet that he wants to remove because he's trying to break the law, absolute immunity. But there's presumptive immunity for pressuring Mike Pence to reject the state's electoral votes or send them back to state legislatures. So I don't understand. They're saying that because it's an official act, but it's not associated specifically with his constitutional powers, that is presumptive. It is presumed that he would be immune from this, but absolute for anything that is written and enshrined in the Constitution. So, I want to ask you all, based on what you've seen from this Supreme Court, if you think they will try to expand this doctrine to qualified immunity. Where that, of course, has been in debate and in hot contention around law enforcement and police in this country. Do you think that they will try to extend this doctrine to police officers who are pursuing qualified immunity for shooting, killing, injuring a citizen?
And just to explain to the listeners, qualified immunity is basically you're shielded from
your actions that you take in your capacity as a law enforcement officer.
From being civilly sued. So any civil liability. And in some instances, it is extended to criminal liability.
Sure. No, they operate, in my state, at least under the cloak of immunity from prosecution through anything that they do in the course of their work as a law enforcement officer. Civil, criminal. But I honestly tell you, Angela, I wish I could even get to that concern. I mean, in so many ways, it's already been extended, if not in black and white, certainly in practice. Remember, our friend Marilyn Mosby, one of the very first, if not the first prosecutor to take these law enforcement officers on. And that's not because they've never done anything wrong before. It's because the norms of society say that you can't, that it's beyond the pale. You can't pursue them in that way. But honestly,
This is in writing as the law now, though. So I'm wondering if this is now going to be extended. Like, you cannot, right? So that's what I'm curious about. Like, if we, and I know we got to take a break. But I want to know, do we think it's going to be extended to cabinets? Do we think it'll be extended to mayors and governors? Do we think this would be extended to other people on the federal level? But do we think that this same letter of the law, interpretation of the law, and really the making of a brand new law will be extended to other folks who are acting on behalf of the government in these roles? Or is it only going to be the president?
No, I think that the court has already proven that they know no bounds with the egregiousness of some of these decisions that they issue. I would say, though, specifically to your question around qualified immunity as it relates to officers, my understanding is that would only extend to federal officers, which is why we always talk about the First Step Act needs a second step and a third step. I think in terms of shielding law enforcement officers who are not federal police, that would have to happen at the local level, like
local
you
and
know,
state,
like the state, right?
Yeah,
the state Supreme Court would have to. Yeah, but I think the question you're raising is a legitimate point. I understand your question. I'm making a different point in that if that has to happen at the state Supreme Court level, and that is also a potential challenge, because while we pay so much attention to the Supreme Court, before something makes it to the Supreme Court, they've gone through the lower courts first. So it's even I think, a reason to pay attention to those down ballot issues that are on that are on the ballot when you're voting for something. Because I can see, particularly in a state like Florida that Andrew was talking about, where absolutely Ron DeSantis could do something like that. You think about red states like Alabama, Governor Kay Ivey, and already the abysmal decisions that she's made, especially when it comes around criminal justice and prisons. Mississippi with Tate Reeves, like I can't even imagine where this might go. So yes, I think this will cast a dark shadow over everything.
Rolling back that, Tiffany, to your point, states have already, in this legislative session, have already preempted the court by laying down law in the states that are shredding doctrines around ethics, around being able to be prosecuted for what they do in their offices. So this is something to Angela. Now that I understand your question better, the court said that in the executive branch is the president of the United States singularly. That the Congress has 535 members. The court has 9 members, and thousands of judges underneath it. But in this case, what makes him so exceptional is that he alone is the executive branch. So as it relates to extending immunity to officers, people who work with under him, cabinet members, so on and so forth, that's off the table. But what isn't off the table is that the president can direct them to take an action, and he can then immediately pardon them. Pardon them from any future prosecution.
Or anyone he deputizes, which some of that is enshrined in the Constitution, which is absolute immunity. And any other official act, again, is that presumed immunity. I know we're over time to take a break. Yeah. So Joe Biden still has a lot that he could get done before he leaves. I know that we all have a laundry list, y'all. Hopefully this can become banter for y'all's tables at during this holiday, but I really want to see him knock some things out before he leaves. We talked about it once before on this show. What should President Biden do before he leaves office?
Greetings, Angela, Andrew, and Tiffany, the trifecta of the Native Land Podcast. Hi, my name is Keith Singleton, coming from Atlanta, Georgia. We found out that President Joe Biden has dropped out of the 2024 presidential election. I was saddened by that. However, I was elated with his endorsement of Kamala Harris for president, the top of the ticket for the Democratic presidency. For me, it's the only choice. Any other choice, I am not staying with the Democratic Party. I'm going somewhere else, and it's not going to be the Republican Party or that grand old party. Again, thank you for taking the time to look at my video. Hope this helps out. Again, you're listening to the Native Land Podcast, the innovators of us politics.
Keith, we're so grateful for your comments. Y'all make sure you keep them coming. I thought that we could use this, y'all, as a jumping off point for what should Joe Biden do with the rest of his term. Well, we know that he just recently did not only dropping out of the presidential race, which is historic in and of itself, but endorsing Kamala Harris on that same day, saying that she was the person that could take the party and this country to the next level. It is so important that he continues to solidify his legacy with the rest of his term. So since on this podcast, we like to keep our imagination, as Tiffany always challenges us and our good brother Andrew challenges us. Y'all, when you dream big, what does Joe Biden accomplish for the rest of his term?
I don't know if legally he can do some of these things, but definitely federal pardons, which we know he can legally do through the DOJ pardon office. Obviously, for Marilyn Mosby, Angela worked so hard on that, but multiple other people. I would like to see more non-violent offenders pardoned, and not in a way that's safe, like, oh, but what will the Republicans say? Like, if you want to pardon 50,000 people, like, do it. There are people sitting, what happens in our prisons is inhumane. I used to focus on that a lot. And when you take away somebody's liberty, like, it needs to be like no other choice. And we've just been adversely impacted by a very punishing criminal justice system. So pardons is probably at the top of my list. Legally, I don't know if he can do this, but a federal protection for bodily autonomy for women. I think if he can pull that off, I'd like to see that. And if we're really letting our imaginations just like run free, imagine an America that is fair and, for the people, by the people, other people include us, reparations. I think reparations is something in a form. It may not be cash payments. Maybe it's land. Maybe it's home ownership. Maybe we don't pay taxes for the rest of our lives. Whatever that looks like. I would like to see it. I would like him to be bold enough to do that. So off the top of my head, those are the three things I'd say.
Andrew Gillum.
The courts. I just think
he is trying to do that.
No. But
week it came out.
I mean, for it to be done, there's a lot that is intended, which means that there are going to have to be likely some maneuvers that Senate Democrats are going to have to make within their rulemaking process, within the accommodations that they have been willing to make to Republicans up to this point. I mean, we've even seen under Mitch McConnell's leadership where they had basically temporary suspensions of the 60 vote rule. And they brought they've used that process instead of preventively, like they have used it toward the Democrats, to prevent Democrats from moving along nominations and slowing down the process. I'd like to see us use it the other way. I'd like Schumer, hopefully with the support of all 49 other, 50 other Democrats, be willing to make some rule changes in order to get the president's agenda around the courts through the process. I think there are going to be Republicans who are critical enough of the Supreme Court that they may be willing to come with us in the House to get a bill through. And I think obviously we'll have to do what we can in the Senate. And then lastly, on the courts is the appointments of judges. This process has been slowed by Republicans to a screeching halt. You've got Senate Republicans who are from states where vacancies occur, who have literally stood, figuratively stood in the doorway from letting any nominations get through. They will not provide slips. I forget what they call them, maybe blue slips or Angela, you may know the terminology, which basically green lights the name of the person coming from their state to move forward in that committee process. That was just on the course. And then but the last thing I'll throw in there is just, we've got a letter already out there on the Fearless Fund. I'd love to see the president take very simple action as it relates to what is being requested by the Fearless Fund, which is additional protection and an executive order to expand on that protection.
Andrew's out again. I would just echo what Andrew was starting to say before he froze, but he supports this so much that he just could stay still for a moment. And I would say the Fearless Fund is actually where I was going to go, Tiff. It's so important for us to understand Fearless Fund is one of many victims of a people and an infrastructure that is trying so diligently to keep us back from and keeping us out of equitable outcomes. They, on one hand, it's like, you didn't earn it. There's affirmative action policy that you shouldn't be able to be a part of. You didn't earn it. You shouldn't be able to to go to schools, to get funding with us, to get access to capital. So you start your own thing and then they target you for that. So I absolutely think there should be an executive order, not only protecting entities like the Fearless Fund, but really doing the disparity studies necessary across the board in every industry, in every organization, and all systems of education to demonstrate why discriminatory impact is still just as significant as discriminatory intent. You cannot prove intent without the data. The data is there. We all know it. We've seen it. We've witnessed it. So we need some federal protection vis-a-vis an executive order to help us get across that finish line.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I want to see him do is an executive order on voting rights. Everything that they've said in the past, the Supreme Court has said has not been the makeup of this court. So I believe if Donald Trump were in office, they would give him broad sweeping authority on executive orders. I think Joe Biden should test that leading up to the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think that he should go hard on executive orders like if you can legislate from the bench, certainly you can do it from the Oval and prove them wrong. So yes, on abortion or reproductive justice. Yes, on affirmative action and equitable outcomes and opportunities. Yes, on everything else and voting rights, all the things that we know that we need, and reparations. Absolutely. So I like all those answers.
Well, we were just focused on domestic policy, but I would add to that, I would revisit some of our foreign policy as well.
Yes.
This is in the world of, a blank wall that we can create democracy ourselves and what it looks like, because, I don't know how realistic this is, but I would certainly rethink our allyship with the state of Israel. Israel is a nuclear power and a powerful entity, largely because the United States funds what we've seen in just the abhorrent things that we've seen happen in Gaza. And now it used to be an unsafe thing to even say this. And I think we can stand in allyship with our Jewish brothers and sisters, but we mainly stand on the right side of what is good and righteous. And what we're seeing happening there is not that. And the money being used to fund the inhumane treatment there, I would hope that President Biden could reconsider. I would also realign our foreign policy to some of the shifting foreign powers that we actually see. It kind of feels like the United States is a few decades behind the rest of the world on when it comes to global powers. So that's from a foreign policy expert, but also a few decades behind even when it comes to infrastructure. When you look at public transit in other countries and their bullet trains and, their streets and, just how different countries look. So I would love to see some change on that side as well. And, I have to say, when I do watch news and it is not domestic news, you really would be, just terrified when you look at what's happening in the country. And as I said on our main podcast, I hope you guys tune in if you haven't already. I could see an all-out war happening in the Middle East, and that would not benefit Vice President Harris. I do think, unfortunately, that would likely benefit Donald Trump. For this country to see its first female commander-in-chief. And so that definitely has my attention as well. So if there's something that Joe Biden could do before he left office to stay that state of unrest, that would also be helpful. Yeah. I think our brother Andrew is gone.
I was just about to say Andrew dropped. I was just getting ready to come to him.
Y'all said about me.
Yeah, I mean, we all do today. Mine isn't even recording on here. They got local audio recording. But Andrew, I wanted to come back to him because he... it looked like the camera speed was picking up and then it dropped. But I was also going to say, I have one that is kind of petty, but I think some of the things should be done right away. I, for a long time on this podcast, have been calling for Merrick Garland's resignation. I think he should just appoint another head of the Department of Justice. I don't think that this Department of Justice, their failures around Tulsa, their shortcomings around some of the police killings that we've seen, and their inability to reach a conclusion on investigations, the targeting of Black prosecutors, Black elected officials, including our own brother Andrew, under this Department of Justice for failure to revisit any of Trump's targeted prosecutions is highly problematic. They have been non-responsive to what we know is a necessary justice for the Tulsa race massacre survivors. We have lost one since this administration has been in, with Uncle Red's passing. So it's time for these folks to get and receive the justice they deserve, and their descendants to get and receive the justice they deserve. If that can't happen under Merrick Garland's watch, then we should get a new attorney general. So that's another thing that I think he should do before he leaves, appoint someone else at DOJ.
Well, since
I don't really have
since we're imagining things, do you have someone in mind for attorney general under?
You know who would be so good?
Who?
I would be so excited about it. I don't know if she's going to come back to the administration.
Who?
Marcia Fudge.
Really? As attorney general?
Yes. I think that Marcia Fudge does not play. She is so serious about voting rights. She was great on that issue as chair. She cares deeply about children and SNAP benefits and equal education opportunities. She has an organizing arm behind her as a former president of Delta Sigma Theta.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, and she does not, let me tell you about October babies. She gonna go hard in the paint.
Yeah.
She get right up there and be like, let me tell you what you're not gonna do.
Yeah.
Okay? Even
in her
she's
press
not gonna
conferences. So Marcia Fudge is a
Yeah.
former congresswoman of Ohio. She left Congress to lead HUD under the Biden administration. She's since
Housing
left
and Urban
HUD.
Development.
And as Angela said, former president of Delta Sigma Theta.
She would be a gangster.
Yeah.
The other person who would be really good is A Girl Can Dream.
Oh.
I would like Ben Crump.
Oh, I like that.
I would like Ben Crump. Like
Crump.
I think that it's time that the department that sits in the J. Edgar Hoover building. Can he also rename that with an executive order, by the way?
Yeah.
But if he's not going to rename that, I would like to see somebody who fights for the civil rights of all people running it, like just as an affront to J. Edgar Hoover, just like piss on the building.
So I hate to be a dream damper, but I do wonder, with all the things that the DOJ is responsible for, would Ben Crump be ideal in that space? I don't know, and I know we all know Ben and love Ben, but like when it comes to our foreign policies,
Andrew's back. Andrew, I just decided that Ben Crump should be the attorney general. And I would just remind Tiff that, you know, everybody, I mean, there are divisions and departments in DOJ.
That's true.
Nope, but he would be called, boy, just to get them back. I also said Marcia Fudge.
I love the Marcia Fudge
I
reference
like
as well.
Fudge.
I would just say Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson comes from the tradition of being a public defender in the federal court system, which was unprecedented, unheard of, to be appointed to the Supreme Court. We have to do the same thing with the U.S. attorneys general, because we've looked almost exclusively at prosecutors as a, tried and true, guaranteed must-have in order to be a U.S. attorney or the attorney general. And the truth is, the legal system is much more complex than that. There are many manners of accountability within justice. And I'd love to see someone who comes from a different seated background with a respect for the law to come in there and shake it up.
I love the public defender.
Okay, I have one more idea.
What?
Tish James.
I could get with Tish James.
For sure.
I get with Tish James. But now y'all got me kind of sold on the Ben Crump thing. Like, I like the idea of a public defender.
Yeah.
Being there.
Well, he's not a public defender. He never
worked as a public defender. I know he's not now, but he never worked as a public defender.
No,
I don't think so.
Okay.
Do you know him to be? No, I think he's always been a civil rights attorney.
His alignment with the intersections of law and justice, both through the civil as well as the criminal elements that he's represented, that he's worked in. Because of the nature of his work, he's gotten to get involved with these families who sit at the intersection of prosecutions as well as victimhood within the criminal justice system, long before you ever typically see civil attorneys getting engaged and involved. He's there from day zero, oftentimes ushering these families through the criminal justice process, and then being there as a backstop when the civil side kicks up and kicks in. I just think his nuanced understanding is different than really much of what we can find anywhere. Wholesale endorser.
I like that idea.
Guess what? I love you guys.
Love
We're
you back.
over time.
Sorry I missed half of it.
Love you back. Well, I hope y'all are enjoying some good food. We're about to enjoy our good food. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Well, I'm about to go and get my next plate of yams that I make myself. Too bad I can't share with you, Tiffany, Andrew, but maybe soon. Y'all, there are still 706 days left until the midterm election. You know, we're going to keep counting you down. Welcome home, y'all.
Thank you for joining the natives. Intentional with the info on all of the latest. Rod Gillum and Cross connected to the statements that you leave on our socials. Thank you sincerely for the patience. Reason for your choice is clear. We're so grateful. Took the oath to execute roles. Yeah, faithful. Preserve, defend, and protect the truth, even if painful. Welcome home to all of the natives. We thank you.
Welcome home, y'all.
What's
Welcome
up,
home.
sis?
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.